Imagine the scenario. You've just been sent irrefutable proof that your wife has been sleeping with someone else for years. You reach out to her via text. She responds by a strong, angry message of denial, along with a threat. Then the guy she's been seeing calls you confirming that threat. How will you respond? I'll finish the story at the end of this episode, and it will, you won't see the ending coming. Today's topic is not so much about what or why this happened, but rather about responding the right way, the Stoic way, and why Stoicism is just so damn badass. So let's start revving that engine. Before I continue, let me say that Stoicism is not. It is not about toxic masculinity or machismo. But many of its teachings like inner strength, virtue, and duty have been stereotyped as masculine traits. Even when doing research for this episode, many of the qualities women find sexy in a man could be considered as coming from the Stoic philosophy. Traits like confidence, selflessness, driven, and cool-headed were often brought up, and these sexy traits are closely linked to the two pillars of Stoicism. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's take it back to some very crazy times. The year was circa 330 BC, and a rich merchant, Zeno of Citium, had lost all of his valuables during a shipwreck. He got broke. Rather than being a woe's me kind of fella, he started reading philosophy and later established Stoicism. The name's etymology comes from their place of gathering, the Stoa of Athens, the open market. It became one of the major philosophies until about the year 300 Anno Dominante, with the rise of Christianity. During its height, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius was a Stoic and wrote his book, The Meditations. Here was the most powerful guy in the world at his feet, talking virtues and writing about it. Then there was Epictetus, a slave that would go on to further develop what is now known as dichotomy of control. And that says that there are things within our control and out of our control, and that bad things happen to good people, just like you and me. It's our duty as humans to make sure that we do not dwell on an outcome that is out of our control. They turn to four cardinal virtues for guidance. Wisdom, or the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. Courage, strength in the face of pain or grief. Justice, which is being just or fair regardless of the circumstances. And temperance, or restraint from revenge, anger, arrogance. In other words, self-control. Now do you see why it's so badass and has sex appeal? It's Gladiator, it's Shawshank Redemption, it's The Godfather, it's inner strength. So now that you have the two pillars, both dichotomy of control and the four virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, we can move on. But people often confuse Stoicism with apathy and say that we lack empathy. But there's a difference between empathy and pity. During the past few months, I've had the pleasure of working with some really good men that are in some messed up situations. Many of them are facing the end of their relationship and are hurting. During these conversations, the guy typically begins with their story, and I listen. I listen to their pain and their fears, but I'm also listening to their pattern of speech. In other words, I'm looking to see if the relationship can be saved, if it's healthy, if there are children involved, and how they've been affected, and ultimately, if the guy is true love or if it's limerence. Only they know that. At a certain point, however, one has to change the topic from how they're feeling to what options they have. Often, they know that they have to make the difficult choice, but don't know how to, and they feel stuck. Or frankly, they're scared, just like I was, and think they can't do any better. I think that's the thick of things. When you're in the middle of we're understandably acting on our impulse and intense emotions. Stoics, on the other hand, use logos as part of their persuasion tactic. Logos is using logic to persuade rather than ethos, which uses credibility of the speaker, or pathos, which uses the strongest of the persuasive arguments, the emotional appeal. That's why it's such a challenge to argue with somebody when they're emotional. One uses logic while the other one is using emotion. So here's the way Stoicism works. In a nutshell, When something bad happens, it's okay to show your emotion. Stoicism is not about apathy. The difference comes when you must ask yourself if this is something within your control or if it's just shit that's outside of your control. If it's something that you cannot control, accept and surrender to the situation. Accept it like the good soldier that you are. Be comfortable knowing that you did everything you could within your control and that the cards didn't play out in your favor. You're gonna hurt. You're gonna be tempted to react, and you're going to go through some horrible grief. But that's when you have to make the decision if you're gonna play the victim or not. Because guess what? If situation permits, you're gonna start your own renaissance. And guess what? You'll never be the same. You'll be better. All right, before continuing the rest of the story of what happens and discussing as to why I'm a Stoic and how it helped, feel free to comment about a time that you may or may not have acted with Stoicism, or if you felt I did it justice or not, in the description. And don't forget to throw me a thumbs up, and if you haven't yet, why haven't you subscribed? What are you waiting for? So now the ending. This is what being a Stoic has taught me. I often describe the rest of the story as a tragic comedy rather than just a tragedy. When I found out, I remember distinctly thinking, Rene, you've just reached a level of knowledge that you can never take back. It was as though I saw with extreme clarity everything that was taking place. I felt like a Roman general who was about to send his troops into battle, only to be betrayed by mutiny of his ranking officers just a minute before the beginning of the campaign. What would the general do in this case? Feel disoriented? Maybe. Confused? Most likely at first. But when understanding the gravity of the betrayal he's just been dealt, he'd accept and surrender to the situation and be at peace with the fact that he kept his dignity and word. No guilt, no violence, just peace. Me, however, that evening, I was pissed. I was a lion. When the guy called me, I was ready. I was prepared, and I caught him off guard by the level of knowledge I had been armored with. She was with him and heard everything I told him. They were long-distance lovers, and she was in North Carolina visiting. I never spoke to her again, but I do know the ending of their chapter. I was informed that a few hours later, he admitted to her of multiple affairs he had with other married women. Then he drove her back to catch a flight and left her at the airport alone with tears. They never saw each other again, nor will they ever. Months went by and the dust settled when out of nowhere I received news that he was found dead from a presumed heroin overdose. I reflected on his death and I felt nothing. No anger, no celebration, no sadness. It was utter apathy. I had already moved on. The guy was a sociopath and he caused a lot of harm to other people, not just me. But I'd like to think that somehow, despite this being done out of pure hedonism, that the world turned it into his very last act of kindness. Because if he had died before their affair, I'd still be with her being cheating on and not knowing a single thing. That's what Stoicism did for me. My ex wasn't the best nor the worst thing that's happened to me. If anything, speaking objectively, I came out a better, stronger man. I've heard stories of prisoners being exonerated after doing time. Many of them don't come out angry. Many are just grateful and have this natural high. They don't want revenge, but justice, and wish to move forward with their life, just like I do. As I reflect back on my relationship, its turmoils and the fuck you Rene's, that wasn't me anymore. It isn't me anymore. I learned so much from those 8 years. I learned that I was an excellent husband, an awesome provider, a good stepdad. I also learned that I was capable of being manipulated, and that arrogance led me to blindness on her infidelity and eventual betrayal. I also learned that I can overcome an awful obstacle and tackle it like a warrior. And I gained my balls back. I did it by total acceptance and surrender, not by fighting. I look at that moment as the start of my renaissance. Thank you very much. I'ma wake up, do damage. Join them 7 sport, working on